Peace everybody, Carol here. Today I would love to share with you some of my own research that I've been doing, and this is kind of an interesting attempt for me to make a video. I have mentioned in some previous videos that stimming is really, I said everybody that says stimming is like bad or whatever, they're just totally wrong, because they don't understand that stimming helps us to get a coherent brain state. And I want to elaborate on that because I've started to find some interesting discussion topics about that to me relate to stimming. And I guess I would say that I stim. Especially the more years go by, I stim more and more, and sometimes I just can't really be comfortable unless I'm stimming, and even when I'm alone sometimes. And I think part of it is that it's a natural way that our neurodiverse body handles the fact that maybe we don't get enough movement. And our bodies, to be healthy, everybody's body needs to move. So I'll start with, I've got like 2 or 3 videos that I've taken notes on, and this article I'm going to start with that kind of kick off what I'm going to talk about as to, like to help us understand a little bit more about stimming and why we need to do it. And, sometimes I wouldn't even call it stimming. It's just basically you're moving your body. So this article is from alive.com, and I think it's a small magazine in Canada, August 2018. And I'll just show you the page. This is the first page. So it starts out ADHD. Did you know? And the very first thing they say is ADHD kids need to move. And they start out saying that children with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, are known, and sometimes not in a good way, for their busy, fidgety behavior, especially in the classroom or when they're doing homework and they're supposed to be still. So these same kids, though, can often remain absolutely riveted, motionless even, during an episode of their favorite action thriller, or in my case, if I'm writing a song, I will be completely riveted and I'll never need to stim because I'll be so involved in what I'm doing, and I'll be able to focus completely. So they go on to say that most adults assume that the kids are not motivated, or they have lack of interest, or they're not paying attention, but it's actually the opposite of that. They're usually inclined to fidget, children, and probably neurodiverse adults too, when they're using their brain's executive functions. That's the frontal part of the brain, the highly evolved part of the brain that other mammals don't have as much of. This is the part of the brain that temporarily stores, oh sorry, I skipped something. When they're using, so ADHD are more inclined to fidget when they're using their brain's executive functions, especially their working memory. So I was just mentioning the frontal lobes that have evolved, but the working memory is the part of the brain that temporarily stores and manages information we need to carry out complex cognitive tasks, such as learning, reasoning, and comprehension. So I guess they're lumping in the memory part with the frontal part, because I always thought of the memory as being some of the other central location parts of the brain. But anyway, it's all connected. And let's see. So they conclude this section on the stimming part. They don't call it stimming, they just call it fidgeting. Kids with ADHD should be allowed to squirm to learn. And I just thought that was really interesting that that's like mainstream. And then they go on to talk about how also ADHD children, in order to focus better and everything, and I think this is true for every human being, need your omega-3s for a healthy brain, because our brains are mostly made of those kind of fatty acids. And then we also need zinc and iron, so basically you need the right vitamins and foods, and then you need to get sleep. And this is something that will tie into the talk today as well. So I'm going to set that article down. And then I have sort of a page that I'm working from, because I have so many points and I'm a bit lazy. I didn't want to write a whole paper on this. I just have different notes that I put in a certain order. So, so the key point then from that article is that ADHD, and I say most neurodiverse people, need to stim or move in a rhythmic way. Why is that? Because they need to rid their body of stress hormones such as cortisol and other glucocorticoids. And many of you Aspies will agree with me when I say that Aspies are pretty much always in a state of fight or flight, especially, you know, when they're out and about, when they're with people or in crowds or in classrooms or whatever at work. It's just this, you know, you don't really, maybe you wouldn't say it to a friend, but you know deep down that what that feels like. And when you're not in fight or flight, or some people say fight or fright, that it feels so good. And it's hard for us to get to that point. It's like, for me, I know that I have to either be alone or be with my husband or my children, you know, like the very closest people to me, and everything's good, you know, and we're out in nature. And we're not talking, we're just sitting there doing our own thing, and or maybe we are talking, but it's usually when you're silent and you're just sort of in a being state, or when I'm watching a really good movie, you know, I can really be relaxed and not in fight or fright. And so we need, when we do get upset, like, okay, here's the thing, is most neurotypicals, when they get upset, their cortisol level goes up, but then it'll just drop down real quickly. And so all during the day, their cortisol levels just keep dropping down every time they get stressed. They always return to that baseline. And neurodiverse people, I assert, and I know it's true for me and a lot of Aspies, is that your cortisol level, okay, so it goes, I'll do it backwards, okay, so it goes, a stressor happens, so your cortisol level shoots up, and then it might kind of like slightly fall down, but not very much, and then the next stressor, and then the next stressor, and then the next stressor, and oh, pretty much by the end of the day, you're just so frazzled, and your body can't get rid of the cortisol. Why is that? Well, what bodily functions clean your blood? The liver, the lymph, and the vagus nerve, and the balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic, all of these work together to clean your blood of stress hormones. And you need to have your vagal tone, your vagal nerve, or your vagus nerve is, I'm not going to go much into the depth of this because I myself need to study it more, but apparently the vagus nerve is associated with peace, safety, happiness, bliss, and gratitude. And if it's not toned, or that's the words that people in the literature use, then you won't feel those wonderful states, and you'll be heavily concentrated in the sympathetic state of fight or fright. Whereas the parasympathetic state, which is related to vagal tone, is where we want to be most of the time. Now, we need to have a balance between the two. That's really what you want. You don't want to always be parasympathetic, or you just be like a lump on a log. So the secret to health is to have a balance between the two and have the ability to go from one to the other easily and efficiently as needed to live your best life. But if people like me or other neurodiverse people that are anxious a lot, people that have panic or anxiety disorders, we need to learn ways to cope. And the first step is understanding what's going on so that you'll be motivated to take the steps to get those cortisol chemicals down and to tone your vagal nerve. So let's see, so I mentioned that we need to rid ourselves of cortisol. Why would we want to do that? Because if you lower your cortisol, it shifts you from the sympathetic fight or flight state to the parasympathetic state, and it activates the vagal nerve. And the reason that we neurodiverse people have a problem getting rid of cortisol quickly is because one or more of these items. Number one, our liver may be slow. Number two, our lymph may be congested. And number three, well, it's a given that we're in fight or flight and we need to get out of that state. So let me talk about the liver and the lymph for a minute. Certain genotypes have a very slow liver. For example, in Dr. Diadamo's book, The Genotype Diet, I think it has a different title now, but he talks about how the explorer phenotype is actually, you know, you're born with a certain amount of genes, and high probability that certain genes will end up in explorer, like O negatives. And these people have a certain liver enzyme, it's called the P450, that's the type of enzyme that usually helps get rid of chemicals, toxins, and probably cortisol too, it's slow. It's the liver enzyme that your body makes, maybe due to a mutation or something. Everybody has mutations. That's what gives us our personality. I don't mean a bad mutation. It's just a mutation. It's one of the many differences that we all have. Anyway, that is slow, and so it didn't bother us, before we were living in an environment with a lot of toxins and stressors. But now that we are, all those O-negative people and other explorer types, we have a lot of chemicals and stress to deal with, and we're just not able to handle it. And so that's why we stim, and that's why sometimes we have to do liver cleanses, or just don't eat a lot of chemicals and try to stay away from stress. Like we need to treat our body with like as stewards of our body and take care of it. Anyway, so your liver may be slow. And then the other one, and it may not be a bad situation with your liver. You may have a very healthy liver, but just that it's slower than other people's. And I would say for me, yeah, that's me. And then the lymph may be congested. Well, in this day and age, we don't work all day on the farm usually. We sit at a desk and don't move. And so it's really hard for us to get the exercise we need. The human body needs to pretty much move a lot. And so if your lymph is congested, your lymph fluid system is just as important as your blood flow system. It's just that it's not really taught in schools. So you have the lymph system, the only way it can move, like the blood has the heart pumping through the veins. And then when you move, that helps move blood too. But the only way the lymph can move through your system, and the lymph is what purifies your blood. It removes toxins, and then it shifts them to the liver and the large intestine or something like that, and then it gets rid of the toxins. And the only way for it to be circulated is for you to have proper movement, and for you to get a lot of sleep. I'll mention more on that in a minute. And so, because that's when a lot of the cleaning occurs. So, because of these two factors, Aspies can be slow to rid of cortisol. Okay, so note, did you know that when neurotypicals get stressed, they may involuntarily shiver, which is kind of like an involuntary stimming, because I know I've shivered before too, and my teeth will chatter or my body will shake, and that kind of does the same thing. It makes their body vibrate and gives movement, which then helps clear the cortisol. So did you know that when, like, say if a zebra is being chased by a tiger and he escapes, okay, so what happens is the zebra sometimes will go and rest, and the body will shiver for a while, and that shivering does several things, which I'll kind of go into later. It lowers the cortisol because it moves the lymph, and then it also helps the brain waves and other nerves become coherent. So that's just a natural phenomenon. But it's been said that certain Aspies and other neurodiverse people may shiver in an erratic pattern, a chaotic pattern, and it shouldn't. If you want it to be beneficial, it needs to be a rhythmic pattern that's a coherent pattern, not an erratic, chaotic pattern, and that won't really help. So we have to find other ways to do that, to have our body be moved in a rhythmic pattern. So that's where stimming would come in. And like I said before, I think that neurodiverse people have sort of a natural inclination to voluntarily move their muscles, like rocking. Okay, I love to do this. I used to do this as a little girl, and it would calm me down. And some people shake their hands. I like to wiggle my legs. And I know it looks like I'm bored, so when I'm in a meeting, I can't do that. Or if I do, I just have to realize that, people might think I'm bored, but I guess it's better than letting your cortisol build up. Anyway, now I'm going to grab my notes. Yeah, because I was talking about animal stimming too. When you are able to have a toned vagal nerve, and there's ways to do that, but I'm not going to talk about toning your vagal nerve in this talk. But I'm just saying, when it is toned, you're able to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic more easily. It's like having toned muscles, you know. And when your vagal nerve is toned, you're generally happy and you're feeling safe. And you also require happiness and safety in order to have a toned vagal nerve, so it kind of goes hand in hand. If you have lack of parasympathetic tone, you can have a tendency to get autoimmune diseases, and that's something that's been stated in the literature. When you have vagal tone and you are in the parasympathetic state, you feel gratitude, appreciation, love, and you feel loved, and you feel love for others, and you feel worthy inside, and you feel safe. For me, the main thing is feeling safe. That's my hardest, most difficult challenge has been, how can I make myself feel safe? And that's, you know, there's lots of things that people do. One of mine is, don't laugh, but feng shui. And the way I decorate my home and get rid of clutter, that makes me feel safe for some reason, and it's probably different for everyone. Some people, to calm down, do vocalizations, that's a tone, like chanting, and vibration and dancing, forceful gargling, and now I'm conveying this message to you. You can do your own research if you want. I don't really, particularly, I'm not interested in the forceful gargling part, but some people may want to do that. It helps you rid the sympathetic nervous system of extra energy and puts more energy into your parasympathetic. Athletes apparently do the forceful gargling. I don't really know much about that, but I wanted to mention it in case you were interested in that. I guess because when you gargle, like, I don't know anyone else that can do this except me and my dad, but that's like gargling. I can just make a resonant pattern deep down in my throat. It's not like Spanish talking, you know, roses, you know, it's not like that. It's back there. So I guess that's what gargling does. You know, you're making that rhythmic pattern. There's something called EFT. EFT is something they do in psychology a lot, where you tap on certain acupuncture points and then it resets your nervous system's state. And if you ever wanted to look into EFT, that's a way to promote vagal tone. And I know how to do EFT. I'll just demonstrate it right now. Like, one of the things is, I'll just do it. I won't say what I'm doing, but tap. And I'm doing it a little bit fast. You're supposed to do it about 30 seconds to a minute on each place. Here, then there, tap there, then here, and then under the boobies, and then on the sides. See, I'm doing it right here on both sides. They say you only need to do it on one side, but I just do it on both. And then you do it here, on the side of the wrist, and then between the pinky there. And then a different one said also tap on the middle of your head and then go back to the hand. So anyway, apparently that's like activating certain high chi areas, acupressure points, and then that helps you to recenter. Actually, I feel pretty calm after that. Yeah, my voice, did you notice my voice got softer? And yeah, and everything's just like, I just now got kind of like little tingles going up and down my body. So I have to say, you know, testimonially, my testimony is that it works. Okay. So probably the reason I noticed it so much right then is because I'm alone right now and it's very quiet in the apartment. And so I guess if I was in a crowd, I might not notice that I was in a chill mode, but it does help. All right, well, I just wanted to say one more thing about that. So I think stimming removes cortisol and attenuates other sympathetic phenomenon and activates the parasympathetic by applying a cyclic force on all the molecules and cells of the being, the human being vibrated. And as well as it serves to give you a good workout. Why does a good workout feel good? Because you're stimulating the lymph flow and you're getting toxins removed because of that. So there's natural shaking that neurotypicals and zebras do. It's just the chattering of the teeth and the body shaking that dissipates it. And then autistics, Aspies and explorers and other neurodiverse people, empaths, stimming can help. It's more of a conscious effort. And then a vigorous workout can help. And yoga can help for the type A blood types. And I won't go into why, but read Peter Diademo's book, Eat Right for Your Type. He mentions yoga being good for type A's, that rhythmic breathing in and out very slowly. My theory is that autistics, Aspies, and HSPs, that's highly sensitive persons, and other neurodiverse types are intolerant to cortisol. We're more intolerant than others because we're just sensitive. Our nerves are so sensitive, our receptors are so sensitive that we just, even a small amount of cortisol makes us feel really stressed. That's my theory. I haven't proven it. And our liver P450 enzyme system can't rid the cortisol. So we're often in a constant state of fight or fright. And you notice when you're in a state of fright, your body's primed to run. And if you can't run, you have a lot of pent-up energy in your body. And when you're in fright, you need to shiver afterwards. If you can't do it, and you're unable to create the shiver response, you must stim. That was my summary of this little section of the talk. So, okay, so that was those notes. I'm going to set those aside. And then the next thing I wanted to cover was Dr. J Julliard, D-O-U-L-L-I-A-R-D. He was on Inspire Nation, the YouTube channel Inspire Nation, and he talked about, in that talk, he mentioned a lot of points on how to get your lymph fluids optimized and moving. And he mentioned that, okay, well, if you could pick one part, where would you want to make the lymph fluid be clean? I don't know about you, but I would want to pick my brain, because how we feel in our mood, whether we're happy or depressed, is so important to how the rest of our body even is, that I would feel like I need my brain to be clean first, and then I think the body would take care of itself. This is how I think. Well, so you have, have you ever seen people with a mohawk, that part right across the top of the head? That is where certain lymph fluids in your head must be drained at nighttime. And so it's not only moving, but you have to also drain it. And it only happens when you sleep at night. And if you sleep on your back, it's not quite as good as if you sleep on your side. So if you can sleep on your side at night and get a good, 7 to 8 plus hours of good deep sleep, that will help those lymph fluids drain. So the best thing you can do is to work out during the day or move a lot, and then lay on your side and sleep, have a good night's sleep. Have you ever noticed if you don't get enough sleep, the whole next day you just feel tired and just, brain fog? Well, that is because your brain's lymph fluid did not drain. It didn't have enough sleep time to drain. And so if you want to get rid of brain fog, do everything you can to help your lymph fluid drain at night, and then help your lymph fluid move during the day. So you have to move a lot during the day. And so here's the main thing that Dr. Julliard taught that I want to share with you, that he says, and this is for everybody, not just neurodiverse people, but neurotypicals as well. He says if you can't work out a lot, like let's just say you're wheelchair bound, or you just you're busy and you have to pay the bills, and you have to work a lot of hours and you just can't work out. I mean, it happens to all of us. Well, if you could just do what he calls the fast twitch 4 times a day for 1 minute, that's enough for your lymph fluid to move in order to do its job. And I'm kind of embarrassed to demonstrate the fast twitch, but the way he describes it, like he just demonstrates it by, he has his arms and he holds them way over his head, and then he shakes his arm like real fast like this for a whole minute. But to me that doesn't seem very complete, because what about your hips and your legs and your feet, But if you are in a wheelchair, then that would be the thing to do, right? And maybe a little bit of you know, shoulder shaking too, but just got to get that everything to move. And he says that there's two ways of muscle movement. There's slow muscle movement, like weight lifting or running, but then there's running real fast, or shaking your hands, or let me think. I guess riding your bike real fast. You know, like really fast movement, like running as fast as you can. Like, how often do we do that? Like after 20 years old? Well, I mean, I did it and then I had to stop jogging because of my knee trouble. But after that, I never really worked it into my day conscientiously and consciously. It just happened every now and then. Like if I was late, I might run, you know. So we need to consciously do that for 1 minute, 4 times a day. And the way Dr. Julliard teaches it is do it for 1 minute and then rest, and then do it for 1 minute again and then rest. And I guess that's okay, but I just am a little bit personally too busy to do that. So I usually allow myself 1 minute. Like when I'm brushing my teeth, I do a very similar thing. It's a Tai Chi exercise, and it's where you stand there and you just wiggle everything in your whole body for like, I think he says do it for 5 minutes and work up to more. I don't think I could do it for 5 minutes, but I did get up to a couple minutes, and I thought, yeah, it gets easier the more you do it. It's almost like your connective tissue gets stronger or something, and then you can do it longer. But it's just where you shake your head and your arms and your shoulders and your legs and everything, and you make sure no one can see you. We used to do that as kids, and we'd let our arms dangle and stuff. It was kind of funny. But anyway, you do that, and you really do feel good afterwards. And just for a minute, like I can even do it for my body while I'm brushing my teeth, but except for my toothbrushing hand. But, you know, like try to fit it in. Like if you have a minute to wait, oh, someone's going to call me back in 1 minute. What am I going to do, you know? Do the all-over body shake, or do the fast hand twitch. So anyway, this is so important, and it's almost like maybe the whole talk is just culminating in this one recommended exercise that I thought that was just really good. It ties everything together. It gives your body, your lymph, what you need, and it really makes you feel good. So for me, if something happens stressful, I've always said in my videos that you sneak away to the restroom, you know, so that you can like regain yourself, and nobody even knows you're stressed, you know, like say if you're at work, and you can, like I would do yoga or something, but now you can go in the bathroom stall and do the all-over body switch for 1 minute, and that's going to really reset your system and help you to get rid of the cortisol that you just built up. So I hope that helps, you know, that helps you. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this talk is why does shaking help you to think better and help you to gain coherence in your brain. And by coherence, I mean that your nerve firings in your brain are synchronous. Because when they're not synchronous and they're chaotic, sometimes that will make you, pretty much always, that'll make you feel bad. But when they're coherent, you feel good. And when they're coherent, you can think. And if they're not coherent, if they're chaotic, the nerve firing patterns aren't firing together at all, then you're sort of like, that would be called brain fog, or scattered, or you can't focus, or you are in fight or flight, for example. So it's good to know about coherent brain firings, because not only does the more time you spend in a coherent state, the longer you're going to live, the healthier you're going to be, the happier you're going to be, the better quality of life you're going to have. And I had first heard about brain coherence when I did biofeedback, and then and practiced that for a while and learned how to get into the Theta state, for example. And then there's something called the HeartMath Institute, and there's a lot of really great scientists there that teach people how to get into coherent states. And I encourage you to look them up. And they have books and probably videos and papers that they've written, technical papers. They also sell devices that help you, but I'm not really a device kind of person. I like to be able to do everything independently. Like when I do yoga, I never like to use the stretchy bands or the blocks, because then you're at home and you can't do it, right? So I like to just be able to do it, not even with a yoga mat, just wherever I am. I'd like to do yoga that way. barefoot in the grass, you know. So, so why STEM? Let's talk about the science behind that. I'll start by mentioning that there was a TED Talk guy. I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but you probably, I don't know, maybe you'll find him one day. But he taught you, I think the title is something like How to Fall Asleep in 2 Minutes, Guaranteed, or something like that. But how to fall asleep. So he says, so he's a drummer, and so this was just his personal eureka, his personal revelation. He says that he starts to tap, well, he taps on his legs, okay, but I'm going to just tap here because my legs aren't in the camera. So he starts and he's like, taps out a beat like this. And then just about 30 seconds and just goes a little slower. And he's laying in his bed doing this. Forgot to say that. And then just a little slower. And then he just, I don't know, after about, you know, he like goes from 1 to 5 minutes. Just imperceptibly slower. About 5 minutes, you know, he's like doing this. And then pretty much he just falls asleep. He says for him it's foolproof. And I just thought, you know, that was kind of like, oh, I should do a video. I have to add that to my list of stimming things. And the thing is, when the brain nerves fire and you want them to be coherent, it turns out that the beta state, which is like above 14 hertz, 14 cycles per second, that's like when you're sort of like working and you're busy, and like for me it would be like usually accompanied by chaotic. But if you're in coherent beta, then you can probably work a lot more efficiently. And then alpha is when you're calm and receptive, and kind of like when you watch TV, you're sort of, you go into alpha if it's a calming show. And then theta is when you just start to fall asleep, and sometimes if you close your eyes and you get into the theta state, which is more like, okay, alpha is like 10 to 14 hertz, and then theta is more like 5 to 9 hertz, or so different people say different ranges, but basically it's below alpha. And when I close my eyes in theta, I can always tell when I'm in theta because I'll see these vivid pictures, and the more I do it, the more the vivid the pictures get. I mean, like, the more I do it throughout my life. So when I first started having hypnagogic images that I was conscious of, they're so clear, it's like looking at a movie screen. It's just amazing. I've never met anyone that had these, but I'm sure they're out there. It's not something I talk about, but like the first time I ever saw it was, there was a worm crawling out of a matrix and going back in, and it was all in red and black. And then now, that was like 10 years ago, or maybe even longer than 10 years ago. But then now my images, as soon as I close my eyes and start to relax, going to sleep, you know, I can just look, I'll go, okay, what do I see? And then usually right in the center part of the vision, I'll see a scene, and I don't know where it comes from, but like, sometimes it'll be like sometimes it's like lizard faces, or maybe a human face, and it's so detailed and three-dimensional. It's just very odd. Okay, diversion. So that's theta, and then below that is called delta, and it's like below 5 hertz down to 1 hertz, or maybe even half a hertz. That's when you're in really deep sleep. So I don't know what the REM frequencies are, but delta sleep is when you're in the very restful sleep of very slow firing patterns of your brain, and it's usually very coherent. And that's why you need to sleep, because when you go to these low states, that's where all the mitochondria clean up the mess they made during the day. You know, like, by mess I mean, when the mitochondria are busy all day long, mitochondria in your cell, those are the powerhouses, they're busy cranking out ATP power to power yourself during the day. And at night, anything, you know, like reactive byproducts that are in there, they get rid of them. And so if you don't get enough sleep, not only is your lymph fluid not drained, but your mitochondria have toxic buildup, and so does the inside of your cells. So of course you'll get brain fog. Okay, so so that was the sleep method of getting to sleep. And then the question I want to pose is, why does tapping cause your brain to fire in that rhythmic pattern? Because your nerves firing aren't really sound or movement or pressure waves, are they? Those are electrical firings. So, how come the moving, the tapping, even thinking about tapping, some people say you just think about tapping, it helps you calm down, or how can that make your brain fire? You know, it doesn't seem obvious, but here's what I think. Now, our body is filled with many kinds of molecules, and almost all of them, or a lot of them, are piezoelectric. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you put pressure, like here's a molecule, if you put pressure on the molecule, you get a voltage gradient across that molecule. And so that's how speakers work. You know, there's a little piezoelectric crystal in there, and your electrical signal is like on, off, and so then that crystal is like going, when it's on, it'll like contract, because you're putting in the electrical signal, and then you take away the electrical signal, and that piezoelectric material will expand again, because the voltage difference is proportional to the distance, or how much the crystal expands and contracts. So if our brain chemicals and the nerve and the molecules in the nerve and the whole structure has a lot of piezoelectric components in it, then when you start tapping, stimming, or listening to a rock band at a certain, frequency, that is a pressure wave, goes into your brain and every cell in your body. And when that pressure wave touches those piezoelectric molecules or cellular components, such as DNA, for example, which is piezoelectric, then it's going to cause them, it's going to give them a pressure on them, right? When the sound wave hits the DNA, it's going to kind of like make it move. Like say if you hit a DNA molecule with a certain tone, like 528 hertz, that's one of the Solfeggio frequencies that's known to heal DNA. So it makes the DNA like start pulsing. So these sound waves cause the molecules to start vibrating, and then there you go. And when that happens, you're putting a voltage difference on it as well. When it's compressed, the voltage goes up, and when it's relaxes, it goes back down to zero. So you're putting a sinusoidal voltage on all these piezoelectric components in your body, including your nerves and your brain. And so most of them will start to follow that input that you're giving it. They might have been above or less, sort of randomly. Ooh, this one's going slow and this one's going fast. And so, but pretty soon they'll start to resonate together. And that's resonance phenomenon. If you study resonance, it's everywhere. The whole universe is resonance, and the things that last are resonance patterns, and the things that dissipate and disappear are the chaotic patterns. So that's why life is pro-resonance and anti-chaos. And death is anything that gives chaos to a situation is sort of like pro-death. So we want things to be resonant and beautiful and in harmony. Anyway, so I don't know, this is my way of explaining it. And like any resonance phenomenon, the brain nerve firings will gradually begin to match the frequency of the input, whether it's the tapping or the rocking or the moving your hands or the music that you listen to or the tone. And it explains why music is so important to our mood, and why slow music relaxes you, and why some beats just don't feel right. All the Solfeggio frequencies are claimed by a lot of scientists to help different components in the body resonate. And that's why Solfeggio frequencies are considered to be very, very healing. I recently ordered 2 Native American flutes with the Solfeggio frequencies by Blue Bear Flutes, and I really love playing them. They're just so peaceful and calming. And the original F-sharp flute tuned to the 432 tuning system, where A is 432. It's so beautiful. That was the original Native American flute tuning, and that's my very favorite one. It just sounds right. Very, very peaceful. So why is this relevant to Aspies autistics and other neurodiverse people? Stimming is a music. It is a rhythmic movement. It inputs a steady pressure wave to the entire body, helping it to gain a coherent state. And something that I didn't mention yet was only when the brain is in a somewhat coherent state can it work properly. So I believe that the forebrain needs to be coherent in order to process higher order thoughts, and this is confirmed with science. And as Dr. Simon Cohen has shown in the 80s, that the Asperger brain has more neurons in the frontal cortex, in the frontal part of the brain, and it has many more times the interconnections between brain compartments compared to the neurotypical. So it just makes it that much more of a challenge to get coherence, because we've got more nerves to be coherent, and we've got more interconnections between our brain compartments. You know, so we need all our brain compartments to be coherent, not just one, because the interconnections. So add to that our frontal cortex nerves fire at a slightly lower amplitude than the neurotypical. So we really need peace and quiet, because we're disturbed by lower disturbances. So a neurotypical and me, okay, we're sitting here. All other things being equal, if there's an electromagnetic disturbance, I'll be the first one to feel it and get chaotic brain. They won't feel it until the electromagnetic disturbance is like 10 times more, because they have higher amplitudes in their nerve firings than me. Why is that? Well, think about it. If you have so many nerve cells in your brain, you don't want the nerve firings to be too high in amplitude, do you? Because you might use up all the glucose in your brain. So you have to lessen the amount. So it's kind of like we run on less power per cell, but overall we need more power because we have so many more neurons. See what I'm saying? So if it's going to be low amplitude, then you need to go take your very finely tuned, delicate equipment and go into a very quiet room to do your calculations. It's like having a huge, big computer that requires a very tranquil atmosphere to work. Kind of like my FTIR at work, Fourier Transform Infrared Analysis Machine. They have to cool down the detector to like cryogenic temperatures, liquid nitrogen temperatures, in order for it to work properly. Because at that cold temperature, there's less chaotic, movements around it. The molecules are jiggling less, so there's less interference. Okay, so it's easier to lose coherence for us. All the more reason to stim. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope this gave you some ideas and helped you understand the importance of stimming or movement and the importance of sleep. So here's to all of our coherence, happiness, feeling safe, and getting our lymph fluids moving, and embracing our need to stim. May the force be with you.
Smiling slumber, brain waves rearrange, rapid eye movement and chemical change, floating to alpha from conscious beta, and then from delta to deepest theta. Time to retire and freely observe the molecular dance inside my gray nerve. This dance takes me flying. Meet me in the world. This dance